Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you. Well, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Temidayo Ogundiran. I am from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. I represent the Bridge ELSI team, and I'll be presenting on bridging gaps in the ELSI of data science health research. This is a combination of a team from the University of Ibadan, University of Maryland, the George Washington University in the US, the NIH, and the DSI Africa Consortium. As we all know, data science is relatively new, as we know, and it's a novel and rapidly growing field. And it has the potential to transform health research in a big way. And data science uses big data from many sources with the use of high performance computing and novel algorithms. And all this together enhance the possibility of mining data from numerous sources and also doing a lot of analysis, which eventually will lead to improvement in understanding and management of diseases. These capabilities serve as the cornerstones of data science health research, and this promises us the possibility of individualized medical interventions and novel data-informed health interventions in the world. However, we should understand the fact that current methods of ethical oversight of data science health research are insufficient. And this is because, number one, data science uses data from different sources, conventional sources like research in the hospitals and clinical interactions, and also unconventional sources from social media posts, wearables, and so on. And all this data may be collected without the explicit consent and awareness of those who are generating them. Moreover, we know that data science has a lot of computing and mathematics in it. And so the methods are quite complex and opaque to many people to understand. Also, data science brings multiple projects together that can cut across nations and multiple regions. And we also understand the fact that many data scientists are not aware of the principles of health research ethics, just as health research committees in our institutions also are not knowledgeable enough about data health science methods. So all this together make it imperative that we should look for ways of governing the ELSI of data science research in Africa. What's our methodology? Our methodology the Bridge ELSI project is a collaborative research ethics study, which also has a training component, which focuses on bridging the gaps in the current governance framework on ethical oversight of data science health research in Africa. And it brings together many stakeholders from many institutions in Africa and beyond to look at the possibility of developing a governance framework that will be useful in safeguarding the ELSI of data science health research in Nigeria as well as in the other parts of Africa. Our aims specifically are four: to evaluate, to survey, to develop, and to train. We intend to evaluate the current governance framework in Africa, if there is any, and also to survey the stakeholders' opinions about the current and emerging ELSI of data science health research in Africa, starting from Nigeria. And from there, we go ahead to develop a novel framework that will be useful for Nigeria and the other parts of Africa. And of course, part of the project is to train and mentor researchers in data science health research, and also to train ethics committee members who are going to be reviewing protocols for data science health research in Nigeria and Africa. Our methodology, first of all, is to do a systematic review of whatever current laws and regulations and guidelines and policies are already available in Nigeria, especially and in other parts of Africa. And with this, we'll be able, after that, to conduct key informant interviews among different stakeholders, policymakers, data science researchers, community people, to be able to identify what will be their stake and what will be their role and what is their knowledge and how would they want data science research, health research to be governed in Africa. We also intend to conduct population surveys amongst other categories of people, students, market women, community people, all categories of men, to look at what their take is in data science health research in Africa. And as a result of this, we intend to develop a governance framework by bringing together all this information from these stakeholders, and also develop some case studies which we're going to be disseminating. At the end of the project, we intend to provide training and mentoring for data science health research for ethics committee members, as well as data science health researchers in Africa. The project is in the second year, and hitherto we've been able to look at the current laws and policies and guidelines and regulations that exist in Nigeria. We've evaluated the Islamic customary laws as well as Yoruba customary laws. In Nigeria, the southwest part of Nigeria is predominantly Yoruba, and the northern part is Islamic. So that informs the choice of these characteristics, looking at the Islamic as well as Yoruba customary laws for insights that may contribute to developing novel rules and regulations for data science health research. We've also conducted some key informant interviews amongst different categories of stakeholders, hitherto. And what we are doing presently is to constitute the stakeholders from the KRI into a Delphi group, which we are going to use to develop the framework that we hope will be useful for Nigeria and other parts of Africa. We have also been able to collaborate with other members of the DSI Africa Consortium to help them in the ELSI oversight for their project. And we have established some online training programs for data science health researchers in Africa on so many topics, as we can see there, including protection of human subjects in research, technology, ethics, and regulations, and so on. And we've been able to present some papers in some academic fora in Nigeria and Liberia and South Africa. And recently, a publication on the promise of data science for health research in Africa was accepted for publication in Nature Communications. Going forward over the next 2 years, we intend to conclude what we are doing presently, to develop this governance framework for Nigeria and Africa, to complete the analysis of the transcribed KRI data, and also to do population survey amongst the people in the community, looking at the legal reviews and themes from the KRI that we have done. And then we intend to disseminate our findings, and at the end of it, we still continue to implement training and mentoring programs for data scientists as well as research ethics committee members. The members of the Bridge ELSI team comes from Nigeria, from the University of Ibadan and the Center for Bioethics and Research in Nigeria, and also from University of Maryland in the US, George Washington University in the US, from the NIH, and also from the from UI and all these other places. We acknowledge that this project is being funded by the National Institute of Health under the award number as shown, and we thank this awarding body for this opportunity for us to participate in this project. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Temidayo. Alik, you can go ahead and present next.
Do you mind enabling? Oh, there we go. Okay, okay, let's see if it's, there we go. All right. I am Aliki Edgecombe. I'm from DSI Africa Law, and I thought I'd just put on my video so you can see me just a little bit. A pity I can't see who's on the call, but it'll be lovely to hear from you during the chat afterwards. So let me just tell you a little bit about our project. I'm very excited to actually let you in on some of the legal clarity that we are hoping to bring health researchers across Africa. And so our particular focus is on 12 different African countries. These were countries that were originally participated in the H3 Africa consortium project, and so they were selected as part of the DSI Africa Law group's research. And so predominantly what we're looking at is the data protection legislation that occurs within these countries and how that impacts health research. Now, it's a very challenging task, which is why we need a wonderfully big team of individuals to do this research spanning across Africa. And we have some members that are sitting in Europe and in the USA, and all helping us think about this very important area of law. So why do I say that it is a completely difficult task? Well, as you can see here, there's been quite a lot happening on the African continent when it comes to data protection. So it started off in Ghana in 2012. So if you're from Ghana, you can be very proud. 2012 with the Data Protection Act, and followed hot on the heels by South Africa in 2013 with its Protection of Personal Information Act, known affectionately as POPIA. But a lot of that only really came into force in 2020. And so the questions that we have as health researchers really have only started to be answered very recently. So we're still coming up with our code of conducts within South Africa. And yeah, that'll hopefully be something that we will be able to give you more guidance on soon as it is accepted. Then we have 2018, Botswana comes out with this Data Protection Act, followed by Uganda in 2019, and Kenya very quickly thereafter in 2019. Then we have Rwanda 2021, Zimbabwe 2021, Tanzania 2022, and finishing off with Nigeria this year, just a couple of months ago. Its Data Protection Act came into law. And so really this is a fresh legislation. And as much as many countries which have had data protection legislation in place for a lot longer than, for instance, Nigeria or Zimbabwe, who are grappling with how this legislation applies to health research, even more so on the African continent. And that's what we are tasked to do and are hopefully helping scientists to do, to navigate this really difficult situation here. And we know that predominantly the issue comes in when you are trying to do cross-border data sharing. And that's something that I'll come to towards the end of how we are hopefully going to help you with that. Now, data protection legislation is important in every aspect of health research. From the research design, there is principles that you need to apply around data minimization or even having a data protection plan in place, all the way to the consent forms that you sign, to how you process and store that information, to how you share that information with others, and finally, even how you publish that information. And so this is a very important area that needs to be properly understood. And like we said, we are trying to clarify some of these areas. Now, there are various prongs that are part of our research. We do quite a lot in terms of informed consent. And currently, we are drafting an informed consent form. It'll just be a model that scientists can use for large-scale genomic research projects. So something that hopefully will be of use across the consortium group, those of you who are wanting to do these large-scale studies, and ensuring that it is at a standard that the average person can understand what they are consenting to. So we are also making sure that it is tested across those standards to make sure that really the language that is included there is not overly technical. We're working hard on that. We also are looking at community rights because, of course, we are in Africa, and it is not just individual rights that we are concerned with here on the continent. We are also concerned with what community rights people have, especially with regards to genomic data. And ownership there is a very tricky one to navigate. And so we have individuals who are specifically working on that. Geospatial data is one of particular interest to a lot of you, I believe, and that's because of obviously the great importance it plays in really being able to help health scientists make informed decisions and help policymakers make informed decisions as well. So looking at public health surveillance, just one aspect of how geospatial data is used. This has been a particularly tricky one because it's not fully covered in the data protection legislation that has come out. It's sometimes not even mentioned as a kind of data that is protected or is as personal data, but there is other legislation that speaks into that we have looked at. And of course, it's not just the geospatial data that we're concerned with, it's also storing information on the cloud that has been raised in various consortium meetings that we've attended by various members of our group, and I'm sure it is a general issue, and so that's what we're also covering. We're also looking at cross-border data sharing, and this is predominantly our area of research because this is really what everybody wants to know is how can they legally transfer data across borders, especially when we're talking about personal data. How easy is it to do that? And it's not that easy. And of course, we look at artificial intelligence as well. And so, yeah, in terms of that, and really mentioned really in terms of community rights, we have individuals on our team who literally just look at decolonization, the Africanization of the laws, making sure that they're appropriate to the African context and not just sort of copying and pasting what is happening within Europe and America. Obviously, those areas are very influential, but we want to make sure that it is appropriately applied in the South African and African context as a whole. When we're talking about personal information, the one thing just to mention is that we're talking about the data, not the material itself. And so really, we're governing every area of where you have documented information and that you're transferring it. It all falls under the Protection of Personal Information Act, if it has to do with people. Okay, so living people is really what we're looking at. I don't really have time to go into this area, but basically, just to summarize, we look at whether that data, especially health data, falls under personal information and sensitive information across our African jurisdictions. And I can confirm that actually, in all cases, health data is seen as sensitive information. And because it is as sensitive or special information, it requires very stringent regulations and often quite a lot of box ticking before that information can be shared. And this is really where the challenge comes in for a lot of our researchers. Of course, some legislation here, this is from PAPIR, South African legislation. There are grounds in terms of 27(1)(d) that allows the processing for historical statistical research purposes, so long as you can prove it's in the public interest and it would be disproportionate effort to actually get all of that consent. But otherwise, consent is really what most countries are looking for. And when we talk about consent, the voluntary, specific, informed consent, really, the person hasn't been forced into it. They know exactly what research is happening and that they're informed specifically of the risks involved. And of course, that it makes it challenging when we're looking at data that we're using, for secondary use. How can we make use of those old consent forms that really do not fall in line with current legislation and current ethical principles. Cross-border data sharing, this is a very particular concern, as I've already mentioned, because we now have to harmonize legislation that really was developed for a country for its specific purposes. And how can we do this? Really, the scope of our study, again, across all of these countries, we've done a lot of work in seeing on how that can be made possible. We've come out with data transfer agreements that can be used and with just example clauses that you can integrate into a data transfer agreement. And that's probably a really good way to go. Of course, maybe a bit cumbersome if you have to do it for every single situation, but that is one of the ways that we are finding particularly helpful for scientists. And we are also, we've, I think, completed Kenya, and we're going to be doing others as well, such as Nigeria. So we will be adapting those for the local legislation and using the local terms that are used because, for instance, in South Africa, we have the responsible party that doesn't exist in any of the other legislation. And so actually using the required terms becomes very important. So who's the data processor, for instance, etc. This is a complicated task because obviously we are not only looking at local legislation, we are trying to understand what another piece of legislation is saying, and then the impact of maybe other international laws on that. And you can see why this would be particularly difficult for ethics committees, etc., to actually make decisions, because really it is a challenge. And even I, who have tried to see clarity from some of our jurisdictions, from the commissioners, the data protection commissioners, even they are not actually able to give clear guidance when it comes to the transferring of data, because this legislation is so new and they actually aren't sure yet how it will apply in the health research context. So this is what we are trying to achieve with the work that we are doing. And a lot of our resources are freely available. Actually, all of our resources are freely available, but a lot of them can be found on our website at datalaw.africa. And that's where you'll find the DTA template and any other information that we have for you, as well as links to legislation. So yeah, I'll leave it there and wait for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aliki. Thank you very much. We are going to have our last presenter present. Cynthia, are you ready?
Sure. So I'll share my screen. Great. Okay, so I will speak on our project again, on public understanding of big data and genomic medicine in Africa, called PubGem Africa. And on this slide, you can see the leads or the core project team. So our objectives mainly is to explore different ethical issues in genetic medicine and big data-driven health research in Africa. And we have on this slide listed what are the known or hypothesized ethical issues, such as respecting the views of data providers, and that those patients or research participants are unlikely to be aware of how their personal health data is being used for research and innovation. We're looking at issues of benefit sharing, the inadvertent use of data, whether by academic researchers or commercial entities or by clinicians. And also to look, we're also exploring the issue of the possibility of a big data divide. And we say that possible mitigation strategies could be public engagement, equity-oriented governance. Perhaps it's now time for new consent models to be tried on for health research on the continent. And in this study, we are exploring what will work in terms of public engagement. Do we need new consent models? What will that be? And what will equity-oriented governance for big data-driven research in genomic medicine look like? So to achieve these objectives, doing research and engaging a number of stakeholder groups, including patient support groups across Africa for sickle cell disease and hearing impairment and Fragile X syndrome. We are engaging with commercial entities or biotech companies, research ethics committees, researchers, funders, and policymakers, and the general public, also with medical geneticists across Africa. So this just basically shows how we plan to do the work that we will I've highlighted. So we're using a variety of qualitative methods and quantitative. So we'll do focus group discussions. I will have one-on-one in-depth interviews, qualitative workshops, online survey. We're also going to be doing quite some normative bioethics work. So I did mention that part of our project focuses on public engagement, not necessarily for research, but as a way of engaging with the public on key ethical issues in genetic medicine and big data research in Africa, and just basically to learn from them what is it that is of concern to them about the use of their personal data or genetic medicine or genetic research more broadly. And we're engaging high school learners just to hear what they think, because that particular population engages with new technologies a lot. We're engaging with patient support groups, mainly the hearing impairment, sickle cell disease, and Fragile X syndrome. And the choice is that for those groups, it's because of the genetic causation of the disease, and that we hope that because they have been part of our previous research studies on sickle cell disease, hearing impairment, and Fragile X, they are able to articulate some of what they will consider the ethical issues in genetic research, genetic medicine, and what worries them about the use of their data and how we could best address those issues. We're trying out a number of public engagement activities. I mentioned having meetings with patient support groups. That's ongoing. We're using debates with high school learners. We're using storytelling, science cafes, podcasting, documentary with our hearing impairment community. We're using portents to cover for the younger generation, 7 to 12 years, with sickle cell disease. And so what are the lessons, the challenges and opportunities? I think the first thing we are learning is that irrespective of the stakeholder group we've talked to as part of research or public engagement, everyone wants thinks that we need to democratize big data research in Africa. For researchers, this democratization is mainly in terms of access, equitable sharing of data and its use. And we are asking, what does that mean? What does it mean to democratize data in terms of access and equitable sharing and use? Then there is the need for public engagement, and this is usually for research participants and the public much more broadly. They want to understand how their data is being used, what's the risk. And the second is consent. So much of the research that we have done shows that most stakeholders, particularly research participants or the general public, and researchers want to have some control of their data. And there are different levels of control that each stakeholder group wants. I think for researchers, they want to know how their data is being used, who is using that data, and to be able to participate in how the data is being used for research. I think they're considering collaborations and all. And also in terms of control for the model for data sharing and analysis. And with many researchers sort of considering that federated data analysis may be a much more viable approach. And when we look at the data protection laws across Africa, that may actually be a viable option, including data visitation and data visualization. If you look at the principles of data localization that is highlighted in many data laws across Africa. Research participants or the public or patients, and which we'll just call data subjects here, want to have some control of their data, but mainly in terms of deciding how they want it to be used. So do they want it to be sent for this particular research? Do they want it to go to a commercial company? Do they want it to go to a particular country or not? So I think that's one thing we are learning from the interviews. about the control of their data. They want to be informed when their data moves from one research project to another. And the question we are now asking ourselves is dynamic consent, will dynamic consent be a good approach? And we understand the challenges of using dynamic consent in low resource settings. But again, we do not think that dynamic consent is something that should just be left out and that it needs to be tried. There is need for meaningful engagement. It is cost and time intensive, and then many genetic research projects in Africa do not, or data-driven projects in Africa do not necessarily or do not always have the resources to do this type of research, be it cost or time or personnel. We did talk to a number of stakeholders about the ethics of genetic medicine, and many of them are when they think of genetic medicine, they mainly think of genetic enhancement and gene editing, and because they think of genetic medicine in that way, many are worried about what it means and whether scientists are playing God, and the role of religion and culture in the implementation of genetic medicine. And this was not just for research participants, was also for clinicians and researchers. I talked about our collaborations with other DSI Africa projects, with MOTSRE, which is a medical imaging project. We are working with them to look at issues of ethics and global equity in international medical imaging research. We have a workshop that's coming up in November. If you would like to be part of that workshop, please let us know. If you would like to attend that workshop, please let us know. And we are working with CAMRA to look at ethics and One Health, especially in terms of infectious disease control and modeling. And we will be doing collaborative research and webinars across these different collaborations. So these are the people that are involved in the work that I've just presented. And I want to thank you all and the funders.
Thank you for that presentation. We have about 18 minutes left for Q&A, so feel free to raise your hand and ask a question or ask your question in the chat.
Nchang, could we see your last slide one more time? It went too quickly for me. I'm sorry.
Which slide is that? Is that the one with the team? I can just quickly go through. Is it this one?
No, the last one, number 8. Yeah, number 8. Yeah.
Number 8.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Just wanted to see who was involved.
All right.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Well, actually, if nobody else will say something, I will just say there are 3 fantastic presentations, really great, and really important work that they're being done. And I think they also align with one another in a very good way. One of the things that interests me, because it's been something I've worked on all my life really, is the role of the ethics committees or the IRBs here. We just produced a guideline for IRBs and ethics committees for AI in research with the Research Data Alliance and the European Open Science Cloud. But you know, as I see things develop largely in Europe, is that it's going to be difficult, I think, and also in the US as I see it, to integrate the the work that IRBs, ethics committees do at this time with regard to health-related research, biomedical research, clinical trials, whatever, and taking on this kind of additional load with regard to data, and then, of course, with regard to AI as that's coming on board as well. So what I see happening in Europe is that we're developing different kinds of structures to address data and AI, and even those structures are being separated now to a certain extent, away from the IRBs or the ethics committees. So I just wonder what people think, how the role of the ethics committee, the IRB, will evolve as we go forward, or how society will evolve with regard to doing the ethics review, the ethics oversight and so forth that we need for data, that we need for AI. But can that be done in the same group or in the same structures that we've been using for, let's say, clinical trials or for health-related research?
Francis, that's a very interesting point you raised. And I just want to know, in terms of streamlining the process, have you found that within Europe it is just adding extra steps? I think we were discussing it as a group, whether or not there needs to be more specialists on these ethics review committees that actually have specialist training in data protection, etc. I mean, is that what the future is going to hold, or AI? You know, and then kind of fearing the fact that this might not then result in a health researcher or researcher in general not only having to get through one committee, but through now numerous committees in order to get the okay to do a health research project, and with whether that then makes the process overly cumbersome. So I was just interested when you were saying that Europe seems to be going this particular route, if I've understood your statement correctly, and yeah, just how you are managing the streamlining of that so that it is not a painful process for health researchers to now have to comply with other committees' recommendations, etc.
Leaky, that's a great point. And that's a critical consideration. I think you've said it better than, you've posed the question certainly better than I could answer it. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in, but I think the way you put the question is better than any response I could give. But because I think really the question, as you've posed the question, is what we're grappling with.
And I must say, we didn't come to any conclusions from our meeting either. So obviously needing these specialists to be part of it, we kind of see the need for that. But yeah, we also just didn't know what the correct way forward is. And I suppose it's going to be a sort of looking to other jurisdictions perhaps who try something new and seeing whether that would work better. And I don't know if any of the ELSI or ethics group members who may be on this call have some opinion on that.
This is Temidayo. I didn't quite get the question, but my understanding of it is the fact that I mean, from what we have done so far in Nigeria and the Bridge ELSI project, from the key informant interviews, it's been seen that most ethics committee members are quite unaware of what data science is all about, and let alone the ethics of it. So it's an additional responsibility and burden on them to put this on themselves, and that is why they need a lot of training. We've also found out that apart from those who are involved in data science, earth research, maybe some policymakers, majority of the people we have sampled, we have done intervene, I think there were about 65 individuals from different backgrounds. But the knowledge of ethics as far as data science, AI, machine learning, and all that is concerned is quite rudimentary. And so therefore, we see it as a duty to not allow the knowledge of data science to grow exponentially beyond the ethics of it. So it's quite a lot of challenges for ethics committee members, no doubt about that. And that's one of the reasons why we're taking upon ourselves to make sure that we also put in place training for members of the ethics committees on the ethics of data science, earth research. I don't know if that contributes in any way to answering the question. I didn't quite get the question, but that's my understanding of what we're discussing. Thank you.
I think that most certainly contributes. Yeah, we're just thinking about whether there needs to be almost different committees. So committees that are specialized in particularly in these sort of technologies and ethics around these technologies, and whether they will be then in addition to just our general ethics committees. But yeah, I think your challenge is the challenge that we have everywhere, in that actually these technologies are growing at such a fast pace, and really to try and keep up with the ethical concerns around it and have committees that truly understand it is a great challenge. And when you now throw cross-border data sharing into the mix, you know, it can take forever to try and get ethics approval, just because committees actually don't know how to balance all of those competing interests and rights.
Thank you very much for that explanation. I think it will depend to a very large extent on the volume of data science research that is taking place in different parts of Africa. For now, I think the field is still evolving in many countries in Africa. In Nigeria, for example, although there's a lot of activities going on. And so it's not impossible that the time will come when there'll be need for ethics committee members to be specifically established for that purpose. I mean, at the beginning of many of the research committees, we started with a general research ethics committees, and now we have different groups focusing on different aspects: stem cell, some on animal research, some on social science research, and all that. I mean, that's how we began in Ibadan, general research committees. Then we have about 4 or 5 now, each focusing on different aspects of research. So I envisage that again is going to happen with data science as the volume of work and research that takes place in that space continue to grow. Over.
I think Nchangwe wants to say something, and Boubacar as well.
Boubacar, you can go ahead and speak.
Thank you very much for those nice presentations. I think Francis has raised a very important point here. And I think Temidayo has suggested one possible solution. I think, you know, this idea of having a general ethics committee or ERB having subcommittees that would specialize in different areas. So you would also think that in the future, we would have subcommittees that would have focus on data or AI tools and stuff like that. In the meantime, there could be an interim solution where if we don't have the specialized skills in our institutions, can we use other bodies as consultants. The ethics, the IRB would send any proposal to a particular body to look at and then send their report before the IRB concludes on the assessment of the application, for instance. I don't know if Django, you want to say something about it. I had one or two questions to the speakers, but let Django say something on this subject before I change it.
Okay, thanks, Boubacar. The first thing I just wanted to say is that in the interviews that we did, I think research ethics committee members say that they're seeing some sort of a rise in data-driven health research projects, and they are really struggling with the review. And what they are suggesting, at least from the interviews we've done so far, is that perhaps they could have, they need guidance, and maybe they with updating their standard operating procedures on what are the key ethical issues to focus on or to look at in research proposals when they get a research project that's much more data driven. So I think that's one help they are asking for, and it's very similar to for genetic research for those who are familiar with H3 Africa. Then most of them updated their standard operating procedures to cover review for genetic research. So I think that's one area of support that the consortium or the ELSI research projects could consider giving to ethics committees, maybe just helping them with updating their operating procedures for data-driven research, for AI and for other specific areas of genetics. So I think that's what we are learning from the interviews.
Charlie, if I could say something about that, because I think that's fantastic. You're doing these interviews. It's really important. And that was an eye opener from what you just said now too, to see what they're speaking about. I have a couple of considerations that go back a bit to what we were saying here, to what Aliki was saying, and also Tamidayo was saying, and you too. First thing to consider, I always consider with this, we're going to have to get kicked out of here, I guess. But I just want to say this. The challenge is that we're moving into really digitalized societies, so that, let's say, even if we take genetic data, which on the face of it looks like, health data, research data, already on the face of it, it's much more than just health data, much more than just research or health research data. It's insurance data. It's data that police use. It's data for surveillance and other things like that. So all of this data that we have in our societies is becoming very large, and it has to do with much more than just research. And the other thing I would say too is, so we just have to move in with the direction that I think it's going. Sorry, took the time.